open this for next year's election.
I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, and do we have any other nomination? Councillor Long?
I was just going to propose that John Fuller carried on as chairman.
Okay. Can we have a show of hands, please? Yep. Yep. Okay, then I will confirm that Councillor Fuller will be the chair for the next year of Norfolk Strategic Planning Member Forum. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your confidence in me. I don't know how many years I've done it now, but it seems to be longer than I remember, but there we are. Good. Right, okay, so going through the minutes of the meeting on when was it, July's meeting? It was quite a full meeting, if you remember, and we discussed strategic planning framework update and the Transport East guys as well. So there we are. Okay, let's, if there are any comments on that, I'll take them now. Otherwise, let's move on to the first substantive part of the agenda. And I'm just trying to find on my screen now, bear with me. This one here, yeah, good. Okay, so the framework update, and presumably, Trevor, you're going to lead us on this. And in the papers, although I notice it's not referenced on the agenda, there's an item on whether we should have a county-wide design guide. So hopefully you're going to update us on that as we talk. Over to you, Trevor.
Hey, thank you. Yes, there's 4 items to update you on. Two old items which are outstanding from the work to update the 3rd version of the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, and 2 items that we are looking at which came out of the work that we completed to update the document with suggestions for work we should take forward. So I'll go over the outstanding work from the previous update first. We were hoping to have a presentation at this member forum on the elderly study that we are completing. Unfortunately, it's still not quite ready. So we're in a position where we've had to postpone that until the next member forum. But we should be on target to do that now. We've just got a few outstanding issues that we need to complete with the update of the study. And we've lined up someone from the county to give you an update on the work that the county are doing to bring forward some of these initiatives and how they can sort of be implemented. So that will follow for the next forum. The next thing to update you on the other outstanding piece of work is the Green Infrastructure Recreational Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy. As you may remember, we've talked about this at a number of forums previously. Officers have gone away to try and get some cross-county agreement to take the work forward based on the feedback that we've received from previous member forums. As we stand at the moment, we're trying to pull together a statement of common ground across the county, which we'll have in agreement with Natural England. At the moment, the wording of that is still being finalised. We had to wait a few weeks recently to get some feedback from Natural England in terms of their input into what they'd like to see in the statement of common ground. And it's now going around some directors within the Greater Norwich to get their approval before we take it forward. So at the moment, we haven't been able to get the county-wide agreement in place yet, but we're hoping that at the next member forum, we can give you a further update on that. And the process will then be for each authority to endorse the statement of common ground so we can take this work forward. In conjunction with this work, we are trying to look at how we would implement the tariff that was proposed as part of this work. And there are some proposals to implement it through the county council. So there's some similar work going on already around biodiversity net gain and the requirements from the Environment Bill. So we're looking to work in conjunction with them to do the update of the mitigation measures which have been proposed, but also to implement the governance and management of the fund that's created by the collection of the tariff. So
sorry,
again,
Trevor, where's this been promulgated before? Because that's an absolute non-starter. they have neither the statutory responsibility nor the. It's just a total non-starter. We're the planning authorities. It's our job.
Absolutely, but obviously it's a county-wide piece of work, a county-wide tariff, and obviously the county work over the whole of the county of Norfolk. Obviously, each district doesn't, so they have a lot of officers, and a lot of work that they do covers the whole of the county. So they've got the experience and the knowledge in the areas that need to be addressed as part of the mitigation. So that was a proposal. It's good to get some feedback though if we feel it's a non-start, but I'm happy to listen to other views and comments on the idea. And we also have John Jones, I noticed on the call, who may be happy to sort of comment on how it could potentially work.
Who thinks it is a good idea? Well, there's your answer, Trevor. So this is such a material change from what we've discussed previously. Such a material change, having got this far.
Well, I just highlight we've come up with a number of ideas previously about how it can be done. We talked about Natural England being involved in the implementation. We talked about an individual local planning authority being involved in the implementation, and those ideas were not seen as workable either. So we had to look at other options as to how we could potentially implement it. So I'd be very keen to understand if there are any views as to how we think it should be implemented, so we can take those forward and start to look at ideas.
It's something we're working on in Suffolk at the moment. There has to be a unified declaration and decision to support what we have to do for biodiversity. It's so vital.
Okay, Brian, sorry, I couldn't see you. Your thing was off. So let's your indicator, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is something that I feel it's most important that we have and we have in place across the whole of Norfolk. I know Kingston and West Norfolk have had a scheme in place to provide some contribution towards the biodiversity and the impact of more development on protected landscapes and features within those landscapes. Surely we can get some agreement across Norfolk that something needs to happen in each area, and there's absolutely no point in one area, raising money on a roof tax basis to try and alleviate a problem when just over the border there'll be more properties built and so on. John, I thought this was something that we were progressing, and obviously county had started to take the lead on because it was going to be a county-wide scheme rather than not. But I stand to be corrected on it.
I think the agreement was, Brian, that all the planning authorities who actually run the plans, it's SIL-like, we operate SIL ourselves for those authorities that do and have the statutory responsibility, would be leading this. But absolutely, we cooperate together in the implementation. But ultimately, delegation of this to on a county-wide basis it certainly won't be acceptable to South Norfolk, especially given the shenanigans we've had going here. I think it's important that Trevor, you missed that, you forgot to say that Natural England took some legal advice because they questioned whether the approach which we're taking, which is to have an interim charge, but then to work out the details later, was legal or not. And the legal advice is that our approach is lawful. And as we progress to working out how we're going to implement this, that's where we're going to. That's the next piece of work to be done, isn't it? Trevor?
Well, we still don't have a county-wide statement of common ground in place as of yet. So we are still working to try and achieve that.
That was only, but isn't that only because Natural England were taking legal advice as to whether our default approach was the correct one? My intelligence from my director is that our approach has now been adjudged to be the correct approach, and therefore there's no impediment to us now signing up. as we agreed, without modification in July.
Well, the statement of common ground, which was agreed with Natural England, was one which was created by Greater Norwich. So there was still some feedback from other districts as to what should be in that statement of common ground, and I don't think that's been fully agreed as of yet.
Okay. Paul, you put your hand up, and then so has Alan.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more colour to what Trevor's said there. Essentially the agreement of the Norfolk wide wording, which we took away from the last NSPF member forum, has somewhat been put on hold whilst we were waiting for that legal advice or amendments following legal advice from Natural England, because it felt probably improper or a bit premature to start debating individual words within our statement of common ground before Natural England had come back and confirmed what they would want to see as amendments. It is still within the sovereign authority of each individual authority to decree whether they're happy to sign up to those words as written, or whether they would want to seek some further amendments. So I think probably Trevor is right. There is a couple more steps to go from here.
So in due course, we'll bring that forward. Alan, you'll go.
Thank you, John. I think the point here is we've got a scheme which, with modifications, with additional work that members ask to be done, we are able to prove the ability of all the local planning authorities to accommodate the growth across the county. So that's really, really important, because none of us will get anywhere with our local plans as they are. Ours is about to be submitted, Greater Norwich already been submitted. So we need to pass those hurdles. But entirely understanding members' kind of wishes to make sure they were in charge across the county and individually to get this thing done, we are exploring the mechanisms. Now, the governance of all of this is still yet to be put together. Now, it doesn't matter in a way what the scheme is, it has to be implemented. And if we have an organisation which has a standing in this, they have expertise, that's helpful. But I think the point is members need to be happy with the way in which it's implemented and make sure that they all feel they are part of the governance of this enterprise, because you are doing this to prove the ability to have the growth across the county. So I think the detail of who does what and when and how much, that is truly still to come. What we need to do is to make sure we have something that can be implemented. I'm not saying by whom just at this moment. And that's the point about the Natural England thing. But I mean, we will need to implement it, and we are 7 individual authorities across the county. So you need some way to govern yourselves to get the required outputs. So that's the thing that officers are exploring. And clearly, we don't have the absolute detail at the moment, but those are the principles that we're trying to work to. Thank you.
Paul? Because you're leading light in the Greater Norwich, and we already have a model which I understood was going to be used as a template, the way the 3 GNDP authorities run SIL, and that was the sort of, if you like, the rough template upon which we were going to come forward with proposals, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to admit to saying this was a legacy hand, but I think in terms of the exploration that's going on, as I would probably echo what Alan said. Really, I think this is something that's emerging. There's a thought of whether there needs to be a central body that can take a little bit of a lead in terms of the practicalities. There is a whole nother framework around that, which relates to the governance and how individual authorities can satisfy themselves they have appropriate oversight within this, and that needs to sit along in very much the same ways that we have a sort of central group that deals with a lot of decisions around Greater Norwich, but that needs to come back to individual authorities for ratification and endorsement, and that's detail that still needs to be worked out in, and I think that's the work that's ongoing.
Yeah. Richard, sorry, I overlooked you for a moment. I do apologise.
Yeah, I'm slightly confused. We seem to be going around in circles on this one. from my point of view, we need to sort. I think some perhaps it's a two-stage process. We need to sort out the issue with Natural England. We must get that agreement through so we can actually progress with the mitigation, and then that'll help us go. All of us got local plans about to go to inspector, so we must get through this process. The next part of the governance and all the processes associated with it is obviously we need to have a debate, and we need to have that and I would like to say to Trevor, can we get this put on the table at our next meeting in detail with the proposal, because we're just going round and round in circles, and either with proposal with options. I don't mind which way we look at it, but let's have something on the table to get this moving. In the meantime, can we sort out the Natural England position so that we can progress on at least on the local plan front?
Well, seems very reasonable. I mean, Natural England had held us back with their legal advice. That's now fallen away, so there's no impediment for that. They held us up there, and we've got a working model of GNDP and SIL, which might usefully, because this is SIL-like, be expanded to include. It's not quite a joint committee, is it? But we could delegate to this body or similar the way to take it forward. But we did discuss all this back in July. So I think Richard's proposal is absolutely right. Let's bring it forward to the next meeting, start to make some process. And the sooner we start raising this money, the better. And, frankly, they've held us back, but there we are. So when are we going to start raising the money then, Trevor? When can we start getting this stuff to the table?
Okay, the plan is that once we have an agreed statement of common ground, each authority would need to take it through their relevant cabinets or committees to get endorsement for that. And at that point, they'd be able to put the process in place to start collecting the tariff. So we'd follow a very similar process to the we follow for the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework when we endorse that. The idea is we'll endorse the statement of common ground and then get the tariff collected by each authority.
But going back to the statement of common ground, we covered all about the governance, the outputs, the measurement and so forth last time. So when we come to our next meeting, Neenan, there needs to be, if not all the flesh on the bones, at least the bones there for us to take this forward. We've given ourselves a timeline, which in July seemed generous, 20 months, but we're now down to about 15 months. So, the clock's ticking, isn't it? When's the next meeting, Neenan? December?
It should be January, but Trevor, do you want to jump in? Are there some changes?
Well, we were thinking about potentially bringing it forward to December if we were in a position to report back on the more detail that you're requesting on the GI RAM. So that was already on the table that we would provide more detail at the next meeting. But obviously, we're just keen to understand ideas about how we think it should work.
Well, we had all this in July, didn't we?
Well, it wasn't actually discussed that much in July, the GI RAMs. Most of it was taken up by Transport East and other things. So actually, there wasn't much discussion about GI RAMs in July.
Well, you better, I think the best way of doing it is to circulate within 2 weeks some preliminary thoughts. So at least we can be apprised of what the preliminary views are. Then we can decide whether to have a quick meeting, a single issue meeting within 2 or 3 weeks, just to get a nudge on the tiller. But if we're to start collecting this, I mean, I'd like to start collecting this at the soonest possible opportunity. We've got a very significant pool, haven't we? We've got an 1,800 house planning application that's going to be held in December. If there's and we're not the only people who've got them in the pipeline. The sooner we get this done, the better. Bit astonished, really. We haven't made any more progress really since the summer. So, and does it require all of us to have signed this off as a matter of law? Does it require all of us to have signed it off before the first person can have it, or if we just do it one at a time at our own individual council meetings, that's enough for that particular council? Trevor?
Well, I noticed there's some hands up. I'm happy to let officers comment
Okay,
on
Alan.
how they feel.
Thank you. I was just going to say, we have already taken a report to Cabinet and members have agreed that they will implement a tariff. Clearly, it's not something we can do unilaterally. We'll be running with our existing programme of collection until we take over into the bigger joint exercise. But West Norfolk has actually already agreed to do this, but subject to the governance and those kind of legalities of things like the Statement of Common Ground, Natural England's View. So you have an authority which is willing to go, and we did that, I think, in something like March, if I remember rightly.
Paul?
All I was really going to do is clarify that no, I think individual authorities can move forward to the timescales they deem it appropriate, albeit that it's important that we're all on the same track, I guess, to get it in place in due course.
So to move this on, clearly there's emergency. The sooner we get going, the sooner we can raise the money. Today is the 18th. Do we circulate a paper by, say, week commencing the 15th, showing some preliminary views for individual comment, and then a paper that comes forward, a more substantive meeting, say, week commencing the 13th of December? Does that seem sensible? Okay, so I'm going to sense that Trevor and team is going to come up with some preliminary proposals, so a rough cut, shall we say, for the week commencing 15th of November. We'll have a quick half-hour, 1 hour meeting by teams to give a preliminary steer. And then separately, say, week commencing the 13th of December, we'll have a substantive meeting which can make recommendations to either council or cabinets in each of the local planning authorities to get this going. And if Paul's correct, and I have no reason to doubt him, then the next opportunity, those individual councils will be able to, on a same pounds per house basis, take it forward, and then we're incentivized, to get going more quickly. As I recall, I think it's about 180 quid a house, isn't it, or 190 quid a house? It's in that order. So a twin track approach, sort of an exploratory meeting, and then a week. And Neenan, if you can kindly canvass for week commencing the 13th of December, that gives us 2 months to get done. Are we happy with that? Okay, so that was the second item on your agenda for update. Trevor, what's the next? What are the last two?
Yeah, okay, so there were two new pieces of work which came out of the update of the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. I'll go over the first one, which is just a verbal update. So as part of the requirements to update the document, we noted that there was an agreement to update the health protocol as part of a future piece of work. So we've now got that underway. We felt it was a key thing to do, obviously, as a result of the pandemic, and also the fact there's been some significant changes within the health structure as well. So we felt it was a good opportunity to start work on the health protocol, and the update of that is now underway, and we'll hope to report that back by the middle of next year. And the final piece is related to the paper that has been sent around, as you mentioned earlier, around design. I'll just give you a quick bit of background as to what this piece of work was. So as part of the work to update the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework for version 3, there were two subgroups that were set up to create two new sections. One was around climate change and one was around health and healthy lifestyles. From the work of these task and finish groups, it became clear that design was something which was discussed and mentioned a number of times, and potentially something which could help to improve and provide consistency across the county in relation to bringing forward climate change benefits and health and healthy lifestyle within developments as well. So there were two agreements that were included within the new version of the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. Agreement 20 said the planning authorities would agree to work together to investigate the production of a county-wide design guide. And Agreement 18 highlighted that should such a design guide be created, then it would need to cover healthy environments and encourage physical activity and things like that. So, I mean, the full wording was in the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. But also separate to that, it's clear that the government wants to see local authorities produce local design guides or codes. There's been much activity on their part in creating a national design guide and a design code. So it's clear that that's something that needs to be taken forward by local authorities. So we set up a small subgroup to look at design and look what could potentially be done on a county-wide level, and they came up with a number of potential things or areas which could be included. So there was one around movement and streets and street design, things like street trees, parking design and requirements, layout types, and things like accessibility and permeability, which would essentially be a Norfolk version of the manual for streets. There was also some areas identified around nature and obviously climate change. There's many areas around climate change which can be included, things like efficiency of new homes and design to get the maximum benefit from any light and various different aspects of insulation and things like that. There's also a nature side of things as well. So incorporating the biodiversity enhancements is obviously a key requirement now as well. There was also areas around public space and requirements that we could see around sort of design of educational establishments as well. It's important to point out that a design guide wouldn't go to the extent of covering things like material designs for homes. We're not in the idea of the design guide wouldn't be to have every house in Norfolk looking the same. So it's important to point that out. And it wouldn't get in the way of neighbourhoods or areas or master plans, creating design guides for individual sites or for specific areas as well. And the reason we wanted to look at this is because there's a number of potential benefits. Obviously, if developers are working across districts, it means there's some consistency within design, which they can use as well. So it helps developers. It also provides time savings for local authorities, because if we're all creating a design guide, if there's elements which can be shared, that obviously would save time as well. But from various meetings that we've had, it has been concluded, though, that there was clearly some differences of opinion about how useful a county-wide design guide would be. There was clearly some differing views as well about what should be included. Obviously, if we're including things like climate change and areas around that, there has to be consistency, and local authorities may want to differ in how far they go around climate change proposals. So officers have met a number of times, and it's clear from the discussions that we've had that officers concluded that at the moment it wouldn't be practical to take forward a design guide for the county, because there are differences of opinion in terms of how it would work. So what we'd like to do is recommend at the moment that no further work is done on design, and we will update the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework accordingly if it gets updated again in the future.
Well, thank you for that, Trevor. The answers, I mean, the government has published the National Model Design Code. And it's absolutely clear that it's based on local planning authorities and their own individual local plans down to neighbourhoods and very local levels, and that would just be inconsistent with a Norfolk-wide approach. So however desirable it is, I'm afraid the rules preclude doing it anyway. So rather than even wasting any thought of bringing it back, it's a dead duck. Not my words. You just got to read what the government's website says. So I'm just sensing, I see you nodding, Mike. I mean, this is for us to do integrate with our own local plans, our own local neighbourhoods, our own characters. I'm reminded that in South Norfolk, we have 14 separate vernacular styles. Goodness knows how many there are in the whole of Norfolk. It's just hopeless. So we're gonna take that one out and shoot it. Good. Right. What's the last one? That was the last one.
That's
Good. Right.
it
Let's
from
go.
me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, let's move on. In that case, we've got the agenda, and the agenda now takes us to neighbouring counties update. And Cameron, you've just joined us, I see, on the on the Zoom. So off you go.
Good afternoon. I was here from the beginning, but had a bit of a blip, but managed
Uh-huh.
to rejoin, thankfully. Yes, so just on a wave update for local plans and other planning matters in Suffolk. Starting in East Suffolk, they've got adopted local plans, which both fairly recently adopted. However, are working on a number of SBDs, including site-specific developer briefs, affordable housing, sustainable construction, and coastal adaptation, which does have some effect on coastlines in Norfolk as well. Baber and Mid Suffolk, they've got a joint local plan which is currently undergoing examination. Hearings have been taking place over the last couple of months, and the final sessions will be in November, and then they'll move on to where Ipswich currently are, who recently consulted on a set of main modifications, so changes to the plan to make it sound. So they undertook that in July, from July to September earlier this year. West Suffolk are currently in the process of producing a preferred options draft of their local plan, which they expect to be ready for consultation around March next year, which is in line with their local development scheme. On a county-wide level, there's just a few bits of work. We've in sort of collaboration with the district, county councils produced a design for streets. Now that's not a design guide per se, focusing on buildings, but it's the design how to make safe, sustainable movement networks primarily, and how to deal with other issues on streets, such as like incorporating street trees and that kind of thing. And we've also been doing a refresh to our developer guide, which is a guide on our approach to requesting developer contributions. So they've both been through consultation fairly recently. On design for streets, we're hoping to have a finalised version of the document fairly soon, and for the developer guide, we're still currently working our way through the comments we have received and updating the guide accordingly. I've also received some feedback that some of you would like to know about the activities of the Suffolk Growth Partnership as well. So just briefly, the focus of the Growth Partnership is currently on the economic recovery from COVID and inclusive growth. So this involves sort of supporting local businesses, in particular how the tourism industry can operate safely. But also monitoring and providing up-to-date information on issues around supply chain and skills. So that's the update from Suffolk. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Good. Is anyone indicating? I can't see it. Melanie, now's your time to shine. Nope. Okay, so that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Cameron. So I think we'll just note that. Are we going to have any context from Cambridgeshire? Alan, that's closer to you than it is to us in terms of, although perhaps the next agenda item with the fens helps us understand that better.
I don't have any particular updates, but thank you for asking.
Okay. So thank you for that, Cameron, we'll move on in that case to agenda item number 6. Mark Ashwell, you normally take us through the local plans update, but I'm happy to take comments from anybody.
I don't think I'd take you through everybody's local plans. I think we generally do a round table, very quick sort of update of where we are. So I'll start for North Norfolk. So we're just preparing our submission version of the plan, and we hope to be out to consultation either just before or just after Christmas. It's taken a bit longer than we anticipated, but we're nearly there now. So we'll be at submission, hopefully, as I say, just after Christmas.
Well done. Alan, are you in a similar timeline, I think, aren't you?
We're slightly ahead of that. We've carried out our pre-submission consultation. We've had 500 representations from about 120 odd individuals or organisations. So we're just going through those, making sure we've got the admin arrangements sorted out for examination, and we should be formally submitting it next month.
Fantastic. Sam from Yarmouth.
Good afternoon. Our local plan part 2 is currently being examined by the planning inspectorate. We are expecting to receive the inspector's report in the next couple of weeks, so fingers crossed that that's all very positive.
Good. And I suppose Andrew Darcy, where are you?
Thank you. Just very brief update. We are at the moment finalising the timetable for the local plan review, and that should be done within the next month or so. So we'll have a better update at the next meeting.
Good. And finally, Paul, I think you better come in for Greater Norwich.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think as set out in the paper, really, we've obviously submitted. We're expecting examination hearings on the Greater Norwich local plan between January and March next year. The last update I had, we were still awaiting on the inspectors' matters and questions, which will give us a flavour for the areas they will want to explore, but we're expecting to receive those soon. And the adopted LDS for the village cluster housing allocation plan identifies March next year for a Regulation 19 consultation. At this point, we're still working through the significant number of representations we had at Regulation 18. We'll obviously keep people updated as we move through that process.
Good. So, anybody else want to have a say? I think most people have dipped in. I think the Broads Authority is having to start again on its SPD on commercial conversions. I think, but whether that's part of the local plan process or not, but that's another one that's in the mix. Okay, let's go to the next item on the agenda in that case, the Fens Reservoir. Hannah Stanley-Jones. Come in, Hannah. Haven't seen you on the...
No, John, I think she's meant to be coming after 3, but I don't know whether we have someone, is it Natalie? She's
yes,
coming
I've
to...
I've just joined. We're hoping to just get hold of Hannah and get her to join as well. But I'm just going to see if I can get hold of the slides. So if you just give me 2 seconds and I'll see if I can find them on my
Natalie,
my
I've got it.
Ah, even better.
Yeah,
perfect.
I can forward it on to you, Natalie. So I'm just, yeah. Do you someone want to start talking? I'm just going to go through to see if I can get the slides up, please.
Right, so Natalie, did you want to introduce yourself if you're going to take us on the first bit?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So thank you very much for your time today. So my name is Natalie Aykroyd. I'm Head of Water Strategy for Cambridge Water. So I'm here with my colleagues from Anglian Water because we are talking about water from a regional planning point of view, and obviously part of that falls the Fens Reservoir, which we'll go into as we go through the presentation. But the Fens Reservoir would be an option for Cambridge Water and for Anglian Water, which is why we're both here today. So happily to talk you through our process of kind of how we're looking at water resource planning at the moment, what's on our horizon, our timescales, and the options that we've got in front of us. And just kind of share with you that process and what we're working on at the moment, really, and then get any questions from yourselves that you might have about any of that, really.
Hello, it's Bryony Tuthill from Anglian Water. I'm the Head of Regional Engagement for Anglian Water. I believe we are waiting for another colleague of ours. We're happy to make a start, but we were anticipating Hannah Stanley-Jones to be taking the lead on this item. She's our Head of Future Resources at Anglian Water. I'm also happy to share the slides if that's helpful.
Oh, can you see it's up? Can you see it?
No, we can just see.
Right, okay. Having a bit of an issue, then hold on. Yeah, do you want to share it from your end?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, brilliant. Brian, are you okay if I start, and then if Hannah joins, we can do a bit of a role switch of the bits we were going to present, and so you don't just have to listen to my voice all the way through, which will be monotonous, no doubt. So yes, so thanks everybody. So we're just going to talk you through a few slides we've got on this, and like I say, if you've got any questions, please do shout. So yeah, next slide please, Bryony. I'll do my Chris Whitty throughout this, sorry. So yeah, just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So the need for water supply resilience, so that in that kind of local context, but also how that links up to our regional position and actually then that national position as well. And those are the framework strategies we have around that. Then we're going to go through a little bit about the process, so Water Resources East and the regional plan, and then water resource management plans, which are at a company level, and then we're going to talk to you about RAPID, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a bit, so I'll not explain that right now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our strategic resource options and the programmes that we've got there. So that, for example, would be the Fens Res and our engagement on that work as well. Brilliant. So yeah, the first bit is around the need then. So giving you a little bit of context to why we are where we are. So the national picture, which is obviously exacerbated in the east of England, as everybody is aware, that if we don't take any further action, then by kind of 2050, we would need an extra nearly 3,500 million litres of water a day for public water supply alone. And some of that is around increased population growth that is planned, but there's also a huge amount, as we would expect, around climate change and the elements around how it's intensifying the water cycle, so making water unavailable at times in the summer, and and the flooding then that comes with that in the winter periods as well. You can see that kind of breakdown on the right hand side as to how those numbers are made up, and as that says, that's public water supply alone, so that's not taking into account additional needs for agriculture, for industry, etc. And you can see there it says around how a large amount of that water, 50%, is needed in the southeast, but there's a really large amount of that that's needed in the east, and Hannah's about to join us. So that's part of the process that we're going to talk you through today. Hannah, I don't know whether I just want to throw you in at the deep end. I'd started on your first slide, but
yeah, no problem. That's absolutely fine. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, I'm Hannah Stanley-Jones, and I'm Head of Future Resources Strategy at Anglian Water. Apologies, I was expecting to join at 3, so I'm kind of just seeing a note to say, can you join now? So yeah. So hopefully Natalie and Bryony have already kind of introduced what we're going to talk about today. So I'll start off by doing a bit of scene setting with regard to the sort of national picture for water resources. So this slide, I think, as Natalie's probably already said, sets out some of the national challenges we're facing in respect to water resources. And And the statistics you can see on the slide there are taken from the Environment Agency's National Framework for Water Resources, which was published in 2020. And what that essentially sets out is states that if no action is taken now between 2025 and 2050, an extra close to kind of 3.5 billion extra litres of water will be needed for public water supplies to address future pressures, including the need to be resilient against future drought events, so sort of 1 in 500 year return period type drought events, the impacts of our growing population, the need to ensure that abstractions from the environment are sustainable and that we restore and enhance and improve the environment, and also the need to tackle the impacts of climate change. And we've included on this slide here a quote from the IPCC's most recent report on climate change, sort of stating that we expect climate change to obviously bring more intense rainfall events and associated flooding, as well as more intense droughts. So that impact on our water resources is really, really very significant. Next slide, please, Bryony. We set out here, this is taken from Anglian Water's strategic direction statement, which is our 25-year strategic direction statement, which we published in 2017, and just highlights the macro sort of challenges that we face within the region that we are operating in. And there are some challenges here around ensuring that bills remain affordable and that our customers, particularly those most vulnerable customers are able to afford their water bill, planning for the long term, and also kind of markets and structures and financing for the industry, which are common to the whole industry. But on the left hand side there, we highlight some of those macro challenges which are especially acute in the east of England, including those issues I've already talked about, the impacts of climate change, population growth and environmental protection. Next slide, please, Bryony. And here we set out the context in terms of Anglian Water's purpose. So we actually updated our purpose and our organisational goals in 2019 through a change to our company's Articles of Association, which essentially puts legal duties on the directors of the company. And our purpose is now essentially kind of ingrained in those Articles of Association. So that purpose being to bring environmental and social prosperity to the region that we serve through our commitment to love every drop. Now, what that means in practice, when you layer that into those goals, is making the East of England resilient to the risks of drought and flooding, ensuring sustainable economic and housing growth in the UK's fastest growing region, being a net zero company business by 2030, and working with others across the region to achieve significant improvements in ecological quality across our catchments. The map that we've included on the slide here is taken from our the last water resources management plan that we published, and what that map shows is what the region looks like in terms of water resources deficits, essentially, if no action was taken by 2045. So we've kind of talked about that regional picture. If no action is taken, how much water will be needed. The national picture, sorry, this is the regional picture, and those areas of red being areas of water supply deficit, where there's essentially not enough water available to meet the needs of our customers and our communities in the context of those impacts of growth, climate change and future droughts and environmental needs. Thanks, Bryony. To give a bit of context as to what we're currently doing now and investment that is currently taking place during this 5-year period, so between 2020 and 2025, before we look ahead to the longer term and the need for new future resources, our first priority in tackling these challenges is always to address demand management first. So that means first and foremost reducing our leakage within our network, and we are already operating from a point of having the lowest leakage in the industry at Anglian Water, and we have, with the rest of the industry, committed to reducing that a further 15% over the next 5 years from an already industry leading position. And we are utilising some really exciting new technologies in our program of reducing leakage. That also looks like rolling out smart meters across our region over the next 10 years to all of our customers. Now, what smart metering does is it enables our customers to have access to sort of more live real-time data to support them in helping to reduce their usage in the home, but it also helps us to identify leaks in our network, both on our side on our network, but also in customers' properties, and then we can have conversations with customers about supporting them to address those leaks. And these are leaks which would have never been necessarily picked up if it were not for the installation of those smart meters. The map on the right-hand side of the slide there shows the what we're doing to increase our supply side capacity. So I talked about what we're doing in terms of reducing the amount of water that goes into the network and demand management, but the scale of the challenge that we're facing requires us to deliver increases in capacity on the supply side as well. And the map there shows our strategic grid, which is essentially a grid of new interconnected pipelines, which moves water from the north of our region on the South Humber Bank all the way down to Colchester. And I want to just pick out here kind of exactly where that grid currently goes and what's being delivered at the moment in this 5-year period in relation to Norfolk. So you can see that water is moved across from Peterborough into, and that connection there in the area labelled as North Fenland is Stoke Ferry. And you can see if you move further over to the east, we've got a couple of smaller connections which aren't currently connected to that sort of main spine between the areas that we identify as Haysborough, Norwich and the Broads, and also Norwich and the Broads and North Norfolk Rural. And what those new connections do is allow us to reduce, and in the case of the Haysborough example, actually close obstructions that we know are not sustainable. So these are groundwater obstructions where we're taking water from groundwater where we're either reducing or completely ceasing that obstruction from the environment. What's not shown on this map is what this could look like in the future and how this strategic grid could build, and we are actively considering that over the next 25 years that grid's extension specifically from over into Norwich as well, so that part of our network is also connected up into this kind of main spine. But the current 5-year plans don't include that because that's at this point in time is not currently needed within our assessments of the current water resources needs. I'll stop there and I'm going to hand over to Natalie, who's going to take us through some detail around the process for developing new sources and also some of the proposals for new reservoir systems in the region.
Brilliant, thanks Hannah. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, obviously there's a really large challenge around public water supply, but as you can see by the graph in the bottom left-hand corner, the chart shows that it's not just all about public water supply, and actually there's some really large needs from other sectors. So agriculture being a large one, and power being a really big element for us there as well. So in order to make sure that we're actually addressing the needs for the East of England properly, instead of working in silos as we would have traditionally done, we are now looking at regional water resource planning, and that's where Water Resources East comes in. So that's looking at all of the sectors across the East of England, and there are 4 other regional planning groups that cover the South East, the West Country, the West and then the North, and each producing those kind of regional level plans aimed at multi-sector to make sure that we are making the right approach and the right solutions for the region as a whole, so that we can support growth, we can support development, we can support industries, and ensure the economic benefits as well. So you can see there the national framework document that Hannah referred to earlier. So this is all about making sure that we have that joined up thinking, and not just between kind of water companies and different sectors, but between our regulators as well. So our environmental regulators and our economic regulators, making sure that we can then really make multi-beneficiary supply options moving forward. And we'll go on to that in a little bit more detail further along. So next slide, please, Bryony. Thank you. So That regional plan will focus, as I say, kind of cross-sector. But as water companies, we have a statutory obligation to produce a water resource management plan, and we do this every 5 years, although we review it every year as well. And as part of that water resource management plan, we have to show and set out how we have got sufficient water resources to meet the current and future demands of our customers over a minimum of a 25-year period. And this is a process that we're working on at the moment. The next ones will be drafted in August of next year and then published the year after. And that's the WRMP 24 that will be referred to. And these individual company plans are also fed into and fed from that regional plan, and they're developed to exactly the same timescales to make sure that what we're focusing on at a company level is reflected in that regional plan as well. Thanks, Bryony. So what are we looking at as part of those plans? So as Hannah said, we need some really ambitious demand management plans in place in order to address the challenges that we've got, the level of supply required moving forward due to those population changes and also those climate change impacts mean that demand management alone will not fix that gap. So we know that new resources are going to be needed. And we're looking at a variety of different strategic resource options all across this kind of eastern area, and particularly in the Anglian patch, that we can then make sure are available and ready for delivery if it gets selected as part of these planning processes. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of detail, in that we have a robust process in order to determine which options we take forward. So we're preparing an entire portfolio of a range of options that could solve the problems, but we want to make sure that they are the right options and they provide the best value. So it's not always the least cost option, it is the best value. And as part of that, we're looking at environmental benefits, we're looking at public benefits, there's a whole range of carbon, all sort of biodiversity, a load of different things go into that analysis to create a best value approach. And then we take a variety of different levels of that criteria and those metrics, and it gets selected as a portfolio using some kind of very technical machines. I call it a machine. It's like a multi-criteria analysis, and it will kick out the best value plan for the region, and we will also do that at a company level as well. So as it says there, we're working through a whole rake of options that can feed into that machine to be able to produce the most optimum plan. Thanks, Bryony. So obviously one of the elements that we're referring to in there is the Fens Reservoir. And it's a strategic reservoir in our region that could provide up to about 100 megalitres of fresh water for the region. So the aim is that it will be able to address the supply pressures in Norfolk, but also as well in the Cambridge area. So that's Cambridge Water, which is obviously why I'm part of the call as well. So it would kind of be a shared resource to feed both companies' needs, and it would be potentially as well looking at, could we support other water users as well as those just for the public water supply? So could it be multi-beneficiary? Could it be cross-sector, for example? It's also going to open up opportunities for recreation, tourism and waterways, as it said there, and linking to the wider Future Fens initiative. At the moment, we're quite early on in the process, and we're looking at that kind of site selection piece and what the reservoir will look like, how big it will be, all of those kind of things. We're at a very early stage of planning that. But it's likely to be located on the Cambridgeshire-Norfolk border area of the Fens. And as I said there, we're working with consultants and our FensRes partnership group to establish the correct site for that location. I mentioned earlier, very high level, the rapid process, and I think the next slide goes into a little bit more detail on that anyway, but the FensRes has been accepted as a strategic resource option in the rapid governance process. So that rapid is a joint unit between the different regulators, so the Drinking Water Inspectorate, Ofwat and the Environment Agency. And the aim is that for kind of really key strategic options that we need quickly, that they can get those programmes moved through a lot quicker than they would normally be. So aim being that you could get a project shovel ready by 2025 in theory. And the FensRes is part of that accelerated programme process as it stands. So yeah, next slide, a little bit more detail about RAPID. So as I said, RAPID stands for the Regulators Alliance for Progressing Infrastructure Development, and it's there to accelerate the development of new water infrastructure. So it's been a long time really since the industry has built something like a reservoir, and you know the timescales for that could have been 25 to 30 years. Based on the challenges that we're seeing, those timescales are too long, and therefore there's been this need to set up RAPID in order to help accelerate those options. It looks to improve the regulation around that and give more support to the sector as it develops these options, and remove some of the barriers that have been traditionally there in order to help enable these things and move them through quicker. It enables then as well development funding so that water companies can progress these solutions, and it works on a kind of stringent gated process to make sure that funds are spent as they're supposed to be spent to the right time and that quality standards are met. And we've submitted our reports. They're available on kind of both Cambridge Water and Anglian Water's websites, so the detail is there to be read. And that gives you all the kind of background to the reservoir and our thinking and our process and what work will be undertaken as we move forward. And the timeline for that is listed at the bottom there. So you can see we've gone through the Gate 1 process, which is where we get accepted. It's the initial design and where we get accepted to the process. And now's a really, really busy time when we're looking at working up to Gate 2, which is in October next year, which is where we kind of get that detailed feasibility, the concept design, and some of that multi-solution decision making kind of all nailed down. So by Gate 2, we've got a much firmer concept, we've got site location, etc. So and then it works through the remaining gates. So as I said before, you're shovel ready by the beginning of our next AMP period, which is in 2025. And then based on that, you go into kind of the delivery phase, and then theoretically you would be in supply potentially as early as 2035. Somewhere between 2035 and 2040 would be the current thinking at the moment. Thanks, Bryony. So I think I'm handing over to Bryony now to take you through the next section.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. So just got a couple of slides just to take you through where we are in terms of our programme and current sort of engagement timescales around that. And then we've got time for questions after that. So in terms of our stakeholder engagement approach, our principles for stakeholder engagement are very much about being open and honest, creating a collaborative environment for stakeholder engagement, and ensuring that engagement is as early as possible within the technical programme, but whilst also protecting the need for meaningful engagement and consultation. So I guess it's just trying to strike that balance between engaging early, but without setting hairs running is very much our approach at the moment. So we've established the Fens Water Partnership to bring together key stakeholders, so representing the sort of key sectors that across the sort of area, across that search area. So say from environmental sector, agricultural sectors, alongside local authorities. And very much what's really important to us is getting from those stakeholders what the opportunities and benefits are for this proposed reservoir system. It's absolutely critical that we get that feedback into the process at that early stage, so we can have that recognition and understanding about those wider benefits, be it tourism, be it leisure. And I guess I'll probably hark back to sort of Anglian Water's purpose as a business to bring that social and environmental prosperity. That's absolutely front and centre for us. So it's sharing that with the stakeholders that know the localities to ensure that we're reflecting that as well. So we are seeking to engage stakeholders at that early stage, and then as we sort of move through the technical programme and we get more certainty around both site location and concept design, is when we would then look to obviously engage communities. Absolutely critical that communities are taken on this journey as well, and again to ensure that we engage them as early as possible, but ensure that engagement is meaningful as part of the technical programme and development of the reservoir. And then just to demonstrate that. So we're anticipating that first phase of public engagement to be spring/summer 2022, and that would be a non-statutory phase of public consultation. But then obviously as we then move into, we obviously anticipate that this scheme would move through a development consent order in terms of planning consent. And so this just sets out an indicative timetable of when we anticipate then those next phases of public consultation to be, to ensure that we've got that multi-staged iterative programme of, I guess, engagement and consultation in order to inform the programme as it develops. And as Natalie alluded to earlier, really our sort of next sort of key timescales around the programme is that obviously working with stakeholders through the Fens Water Partnership, both on the site selection and concept design, technical work streams, up until we move into a preferred site, going into then a proposed public consultation spring/summer 2022 ahead of Gate 2 within the RAPID framework, October 2022, from which point we anticipate moving into the more formal planning requirements for the DCO. So I think that's everything we wanted to cover today. So really welcome the opportunity. So thank you for giving giving us the time today. Very happy to take some questions, and equally to take any of these conversations offline. Thank you. I'll stop.
Okay, well done, everyone. I mean, just to summarise, I mean, there was an old councillor in my own authority, and he's retired now. He's still kicking around though, and he was an accountant. He said, "You'll never save your way to a profit." And energy efficiency and saving water by sharing with a friend and things like that are all very well, but ultimately we've just got to increase supply. So I think, you know, the plans here, I mean, hopefully it'll be done by the end of the decade. It can't come soon enough. And although it's in Cambridgeshire, the importance of that east-west link, extending it all the way to Norwich is certainly in our interest, even though the reservoir is a long way away. And you don't, you know, the electricity I'm consuming today probably came from Sizewell, you know, and it doesn't have to be on your doorstep for you to enjoy the result. Brian, I suspect you're going to make a similar point, but also recognise that in the Fens, and you've got the drainage boards and everything else, winter rainfall and issues you face in the west.
Yes, John. I mean, obviously, I'm excited about this because storage capacity of the nature and quantity that's being talked about has a real positive knock-on effect for water management in terms of water level management. And obviously, if water is coming down, I don't know, the middle level catchment, but is diverted into this as a reservoir before it floods the Ouse washes and stops people being able to get across the Welney Wash, that's a benefit. You might look at the water storage facility being the Welney Washes. Please don't. The locals are fed up with being cut off. So that there's a benefit to that. Appreciating that this has got to be to the south of the Denver complex, because beyond that, the water around there is tidal. The number of locations between Cambridgeshire border and the Denver complex is not a huge swathe of land in terms of what could be selected, but obviously something that takes can take capacity when needed. I give sort of context to what you said. In the 3 months of December, January, February, Kings Lynn IDB pumped 50 million tonnes of water. At the same period of time, the pumping station at St Germans for the middle level pumped 100 million, and all that just went out to sea. Now, capturing some of that would have made better sense than pumping it away, not least the savings in not running pumps to shift it. So there are benefits there straight away, notwithstanding the fact that if you build a nice big lake, people will come with their boats and so on and so forth. So I think there's some real positive benefits in this, and can't wait to see the selection of site and the sort of mechanics of how it's all going to work, to see where there's the knock-on added benefit for, as I said, managing the water within the Fenland area. So can't wait. Excellent.
Yeah, well done, well done. Andrew Darcy. It's indicated. Is that a legacy hand, perhaps?
No, I haven't got
no.
the hand up. Sorry.
Okay, in that case, let's go back to Steve Faulkner. In that case, who's from the County Council, as I recall.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and thank you, Anglian Water, for the presentation. That's very, very helpful this afternoon. I'm just trying to get my head around, in terms of the solution being a reservoir. Are there other opportunities for water supply? I'm thinking desalination plants, water recycling, etc. Or is it going to be a sort of blended solution, if you like, of all of the above? And that was my first question. I suppose the second question is, if we are going to get a reservoir, what's it going to look like? It's hard, the numbers you put on the screen, millions of litres a day, etc. Probably for most of us around the virtual table doesn't actually mean a great deal, but what does it look like in terms of scale compared to, say, just like Rutland Water or something like that? That'd be quite helpful to know. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want me to take that? Shall I take that question?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So your first question, absolutely. So the reservoir systems, and we are looking at proposing a new reservoir system in the Fens, but also in South Lincolnshire as well. So there are two potential new reservoir systems are being considered in combination with a whole other portfolio of options. And Natalie talked about that process of the development of the water company's plans, but also the regional plan. And the regional plan does include other options, including desalination, water reuse, options for trading water between companies, and also in some other parts of our region, aquifer storage and recovery options, where you essentially kind of pump surface water underground to store it and abstract it during times of drought. So because of the sort of scale of the challenge we're talking about, the likelihood is that we will be looking at promoting a combination of these options. So the reservoirs on their own are not big enough to meet the need, the scale of the challenge, and we recognise that there are a number of challenges with some of those other options, particularly around the energy use and the kind of environmental credentials historically of desalination, and the water reuse options. Clearly considerations around the environmental impacts and water quality issues, but really because of the nature of our region and the scale of the challenge we're facing, those actually are the only options that we've got left at this point in time. So as we move through that regional planning process into next year, there's going to be some really, really important kind of key engagements, both with our stakeholders and the local authorities, but also with our regulators around, well, what does that actually mean then, and how do we kind of work through those issues collectively and collaboratively as we move towards a plan that meets the needs of our region and our customers and the environment. So there's some really key dates next year on that broader kind of regional planning piece as we move into sort of August time. So Bryony talked about the public consultation on the reservoirs likely to be sort of summertime. There will actually be a period of statutory public consultation on the company's water resources management plans and on Water Resources East's regional plan in August or early autumn time next year. So 2022 is going to be a really, really important year for all of these plans, both project specific in terms of the reservoirs and other projects, but also those broader plans that support that. In terms of the size and the design, so it's really, really early days in terms of that design work. The size in which we're kind of talking about, so there was the statistic on the slide there, kind of 50 million meters cubed. That's sort of slightly smaller than Anglian Water's Graffham Reservoir. So if for those of you that know Graffham, that's the sort of scale that we're talking about. Exactly how that will look in the landscape, how we incorporate into the landscape, how we ensure that we deliver those additional biodiversity benefits, those tourism benefits, what it looks like in terms of cycle path, visitor centres, all of that is really, really, really early days. But it's great to hear the comments around the kind of positivity and the excitement, because that's certainly how we feel about it. There's a huge potential here to deliver something really, really unique and really, really special for our region.
Good. Right. No one else is indicating, but I think it is really important that we just don't rely on savings. There's a huge amount of water drops in the winter. I know farmers try and store it in lagoons, and that's all to be welcomed. So much of it is wasted, just travels out, fresh water travels out to sea, so capturing it is clearly a very good thing, and Brian makes some good points about the geography and the tidal bits above Denver Sluice and so forth. There we are. Well, I think we're probably done on that. Thank you very much indeed, Natalie, Hannah and Bryony. That's a really good presentation. Nice to see. Are you all together in the same? Well, you're not now, because Bryony's obviously at home.
Yes, I'm at home as well, and I didn't see the note about, can you join now? I wasn't actually at my desk, so apologies, I was a few minutes late.
Don't worry about that. That's fine. Good. Well, thank you for your attendance today. That just leaves the last item on the agenda, item 8, and I think we've sort of given you the homework there, Neenan. We're going to have a sort of a quick 1 hour tops sort of preliminary steer on the Durams mid-November, a date to be arranged electronically, and then we'll have a more formal one in December. Is the view of the room that we ought to try and meet in person, or are we happy just to carry on this one online? Pre-Christmas? Seafaulkner could offer some drinks at County Hall, perhaps.
Yeah, we've got the facility to do that. The chamber is ready.
Well, let's have a go. Should we do that? I mean, I'm conscious that Richard, you've got furthest to come, and I don't know where you are, Alan. Are you in the south of France at the moment in your caravan, or?
Well, I'm retiring on the 31st of October, so you'll be doing that meeting without me.
Gosh, well, there we are. Well, there we are. So, have you? Is your successor available, Richard?
A person is available without doubt.
There we are. Good stuff. Oh, well, have a happy retirement. And where are you sitting at the moment?
I'm in Alford in Suffolk at the moment, so I'm sure my power is coming from Sizewell. So that's that. But yeah, no, temporarily living with my daughter.
Okay. Or of course the residual radiation that came from the nuclear tests in the 1950s. Let's look on the bright side. Good. Okay, everyone. Well, it's 3:15. I don't think we need to detain ourselves much longer, so I'll draw this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance. Goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, John. See you all. Thank you.